Mercy Matande Odotosmi, and today I will be discussing the continuation of Lesson 5, Understanding Conflict and Violence, Countering Violent Extremism and Radicalism. Example of cultural violence in Cameroon. First, in certain tribes insist on traditional post-mortems on the corpse of the people suspected of witchcraft, meaning cutting open the body, a traditional post-mortem to find so-called proof of witchcraft. Families are forced to keep parts of the mortal remains of their deceased relatives in their houses for sake of protections, pressured to keep skulls, bones, and other body parts of the deceased person. Thirdly, a woman is not allowed to stand in front of the Fun. A Fun is a traditional ruler or king in many ethnic groups in Cameroon. Fourth, it is forbidden for women to eat gizzard. It is a part or prized part of the chicken. And fifth, it is forbidden or rare for a woman to be a heir or successor of their parents. According to Galtong, the three different forms of violence, direct or personal, cultural, indirect or structural relate to each other and are dependent on each other and appear together. In this triangle of violence, violence can occur in each corner and can easily be transferred to other form. All types of violence breed each other in many ways, and violence produces itself across all dimensions. For like example, if a culture believes a woman are less valuable, which is a cultural violence I see, then woman may be denied of education or property, which it is called structural violence, and that can lead to domestic abuse or rape, which is direct violence. So you see, the three different types of violence are interconnected and interrelated and can come up with each other. This direct or personal violence is when someone is physically hurt or abused, and structural violence is when unfair system like poverty, racism, and inequality harm the people itself. And thirdly, the cultural violence. It is when a beliefs or values make people think that violence or unfairness is okay or normal. These three types of triangle uh, are all connected. One type of violence can lead to another types of violence. Let us proceed to the violent extremism and other related concept to this terminology. The terminology around violent extremism is complex and still debated, mainly because there are no universally agreed definitions for key terms like terrorism and violent extremism. While individual countries, member states are responsible for defining these terms, they must still follow international and human rights laws. To avoid disputes over definitions, the United Nations has taken a practical approach, focusing on strategies and actions instead of trying to define these terms. The UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy and the UN General's Plan of Action to Prevent Violent Extremism follow this approach. Another challenge is the translation, as these terms can take on different or unclear meanings in other language, leading to misunderstanding. Despite these issues, K terms are still commonly used in this field. Extremism, literally extremism means the in support in belief in and support for ideas that are very far from what most people consider correct or reasonable. Extremism thus refers to attitudes or behaviors that are deemed outside the norm. This basic dictionary understanding highlights the inherently subjective nature of the term which can take on different meanings depending on who defines the norms and decide what is acceptable or not accordingly. Extremism means strongly believing in ideas that are very different from what most people think is the right or reasonable. These beliefs and action go far beyond what is considered normal in society. But what is seen as extreme can change depending on who decide what is normal or acceptable. This makes the word subjective. It depends on people's opinion, cultures, beliefs. What one group sees as extreme, another might see as normal or even necessary. Violent extremism is no internationally agreed upon definition of this violent extremism. The most common understanding of the term is that it refers to the belief and action of people who support or use violence to achieve ideology, religious or political goals. This includes terrorism and other forms of political motivation and sectarian violence. Typically, violent extremism also identifies as an enemy or enemies who are object of hatred and violence. Violent extremism refers to the belief of actions of people who support use ideology motivated violence to achieve radical ideology, religious or political views. This simply means using or supporting violence to push radical political, religious, or ideological beliefs. It is often includes terrorism and targets specific groups seen as enemies. Violent extremism is when you do not allow for a different point of view, when you hold your own views as being quite exclusive, when you don't allow for the possibility of differences, and when you want to impose this view on others using violence if necessary. Radical thoughts that does not condone the exercise of violence to further political goals may be seen as normal and acceptable and be promoted by groups working within the boundaries of the law. There is no single profile or pathway for radicalization or even speed at which it happens, nor does the level of education seems to be reliable predictor or vulnerability to radicalizations. It is, however, established that there are socio-economic, psychological, and institutional factors that lead to violent extremism. Specialists group these factors into two main categories. Are the push factors drive individuals to violent extremism such as marginalization, inequality, persecution, or perception thereof, limited access to quality and limited education, and the denial of rights and civil liberties and other environmental and historical socio-economic grievances. Ito ang mga negatibong karanasan o kondisyon na nagtutulak sa isang tao palayo sa lipunan o gobyerno at maaaring magdulot ng galit, kawalan ng pag-asa o paghahanap ng bagong Pull factors nurture the appeal of violent extremism. For example, the existence of well-organized violent extremist groups with compelling discourses and effective programs that are providing services, revenue, and or employment in exchange for memberships. Groups can also lure new members by providing outlets for grievances and promises of adventures and freedom. Furthermore, these groups appear to offer spiritual comfort, a place to be belong, and a supportive social networks. Ito naman ang bagay na humihila o nagaganya sa isang tao na sumali sa isang marahas na grupo o ideolohiya. Madalas itong nakabalot sa ideya ng layunin, pag-aari o bayani. Finally, there are contextual factors that provide favorable terrain to emergence of violence extremist group such as fragile states, the lack of rule of law, corruptions, and criminality. Now, let us proceed to the examples of violence extremism. Neo-Nazis are individuals One of these are the new Nazis. These are the individuals or groups who supports the belief and ideology of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party from World War II, even though those beliefs are widely condemned today. The term neo means new, so new Nazi refers to the people who try to revive or promote Nazi ideas in modern times. Secondly is the Ku Klux Klan. KKK. It is a white supremacist hate group in the United States. It was originally formed in 1865, right after the American Civil War, and has had several different versions or eras throughout history. Thirdly is the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. ISIL, also known as ISIS or Daesh, is a violent extremist terrorist group that gained worldwide attention for its brutal actions and attempt to create a so-called Islamic Caliphate. And fourth is Boko Haram. It is a violent extremist group based in Nigeria known for terrorism, kidnapping, and brutal attacks, especially against schools, civilians, and government forces. Eco-terrorism, it involves individuals or groups who believe that drastic, often illegal actions such as destroying property, sabotaging industrial equipment, or setting fire to facilities are justified to stop activities they see as harmful to the environment. And let us know the definition of terrorism. Terrorism refers to a particular strategy adopted to achieve a political goal, which is singularly the deliberate creation and exploitation of fear. In landmark UN General Assembly resolution, countries strongly and equivocally condemn terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, committed by whoever, whenever, or whatever purposes at its constitute one of the most serious threats to international peace and security. The terms violent extremism and terrorism are often mistakenly used interchangeably. While terrorism is a form of violent extremism, and terrorism is also often motivated ideology, conceptual underpinning or of terrorism that distinguishes it from violent extremism. It is the creation of fear or terror as means to an end. The UN Security Council in its resolution 1566 uses three cumulative criteria to characterize terrorism. The first one is the intention of this uh, terrorist, the purpose, and the specific conduct consisting of the following. First is the criminal acts including against civilians committed with the intent of causing death or serious bodily injury or the taking of hostages, like killing or injuring civilians or taking hostages. Secondly is the regardless of whether motivated by considerations of political, philosophical, ideological, racial, ethnic, religious, or other similar nature with the purpose of provoking a state of terror in the general public or in a group of individuals or particular individuals, intimidating a population or compelling a government or an international organization to carry out or to abstain from carrying out any act, and the purpose which is create fear, intimidate people or force government to act a certain way. Third is which constitute offenses within the scope of and as defined in the International Convention and protocols relating to terrorism. This must be considered a crime under international law.